Reconstruction was a period of time after the Confederate States of America formally surrendered and ended the Civil War, which lasted from 1865 to 1877. It's sometimes said that it began in 1863, when President Abraham Lincoln issued documents that put into place the 10% Plan, which stated that a Confederate state had to rewrite their constitution and have at least 10% of its voters pledge allegiance to the United States before they could be allowed back into the Union. Certain types of people, radical Republicans to be exact, were not happy about this. They thought that the South deserved more punishment, and tried to pass the Wade-Davis Bill, which raised the required percentage of loyal voters from 10 to 50. Later on, the Freedmen's Bureau was created, which provided supplies and support to free slaves. Things were mostly good in the Union, until they, well, weren't. On April 14, 1865, Abraham Lincoln, while at a theater with his wife, was shot by the actor John Wilkes Booth and died shortly thereafter. Vice President Andrew Johnson took over as the new president after Lincoln's death, and after doing basically nothing of note, he believed that Reconstruction was over. But this video would be way too short if that was the case. While Johnson was busy doing basically nothing, slaves, free or not, were having a reconstruction of their own, with the Civil Rights Act of 1866 and the 13th and 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution being passed in fairly quick succession. But of course, since we can't have nice things, many people in the South threw a hissy fit over these good things happening to these former slaves, including a bunch of idiots in Tennessee forming the Ku Klux Klan just to terrorize them. Johnson, in a brilliant display of intelligence, toured around the country and gave speeches blaming all these issues on Congress and those darn Republicans. Surprisingly, or maybe not so surprisingly, this got more people to vote against him than for him. While the unnecessary discrimination against ex-slaves was not the fault of the Congress, dividing the South into districts governed by the military was definitely their fault. In 1867, Congress passed the First and Second Reconstruction Acts, along with the 15th Amendment, which gave all American men, regardless of skin color, the right to vote. In an attempt to keep President Johnson from doing any more stupid stuff, Congress passed the Tenure of Office Act, which required the president to consult the Senate and House before removing any cabinet members. When Johnson promptly ignored this act and fired Lincoln's Secretary of War, Edwin M. Stanton, it blew up in his face and he was impeached in a vote with a ratio of 126 to 47. His successor was Union General Ulysses S. Grant, who was experienced in battle, but sadly not in politics. Many people in his cabinet were corrupt men with no political experience, and because of their incompetence, scandal after scandal happened during his presidency, and his reputation was affected severely. Despite these controversies, he was elected for a second term in 1872, just in time for America's first economic depression to begin. Republicans didn't want to print more money, so they put into place the Resumption Act of 1875 to reclaim paper money from the public, which of course didn't go over well, and essentially ended the Republican Party's part in Reconstruction. In the South, the Democrats had retaken the government, employing some less than legal tactics to get their way. In 1873, they ruled that the 14th Amendment only protected rights at the federal level as opposed to state level, and in 1876 they ruled that only state courts could prosecute KKK members, and not federal courts. The election of 1876 rolled around, with Democrats nominating Samuel J. Tilden, who campaigned to end government corruption and restore the Union. Republicans nominated some nobody named Rutherford B. Hayes, and of course, most Americans in the midst of this economic depression voted for Tilden, and he won in a landslide victory. Or at least he would have, if there weren't a few disputed electoral votes in South Carolina, Florida, and Louisiana. The Electoral Count Act created a 15-man group to settle these votes, with 8 Republicans and 7 Democrats. Unsurprisingly, the vote between this group was 7 for Tilden, and 8 for Hayes. Before the political climate got too rocky, Both parties collaborated for the Compromise of 1877, in which the Democrats allowed Hayes to become president in exchange for the withdrawal of all federal troops from the South.